There is a plant growing along forgotten roads, abandoned fields, and the cracks of old sidewalks. A plant so ordinary that most people walk past it without a second glance. But for more than 2,000 years, kings, physicians, soldiers, and healers saw something entirely different. They saw a medicine. When pain became unbearable, they turned to it. When sleep refused to come, they turned to it. When stronger drugs were too dangerous or simply unavailable, they turned to it. Surgeons carried it into Civil War field hospitals when morphine supplies ran dry. Polish doctors prescribed it when opium killed more patients than it saved. Pharmacists sold it in every drugstore across America, until 1944. Then, it vanished. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded without profit. A painkiller you cannot patent. A sedative that grows without permission. Medicine that asks for no prescription, no refill, no recurring revenue. The pharmaceutical industry built an $80 billion empire on synthetic pain relief. And this plant, which relieved suffering for millennia, was buried beneath it. This is wild lettuce, the painkiller they erased. The archive opens in ancient Egypt, 1550 BCE. Inside the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever discovered, scribes recorded a plant they called the lettuce of the gods. Its milky sap drove away pain and brought sleep. When you cut the stem, white sap bleeds out like tears from a wound. This is lactucarium. When dried, it hardens into a brown resin that looks very much like crude opium. Ancient physicians called it lettuce opium because of what it could do. It could relieve pain, calm coughs, and bring sleep, all without the chains of addiction. The plant itself stands defiant, 6 feet tall, crowned with small yellow flowers. Green stems are sometimes spotted purple. Its leaves are jagged, with spines running down the central vein. Every part contains the medicine, but the sap holds the greatest power. Then, in April 1861, everything changed. The American Civil War began. No one imagined how quickly medicine itself would become a casualty. At the start of the war, military doctors believed they were prepared. Medical wagons carried bandages, surgical tools, quinine, chloroform, morphine, and opium. But the scale of the conflict shattered every expectation. Within months, battlefields from Virginia to Tennessee were flooded with wounded soldiers. Amputation became the only hope for survival. A skilled surgeon could remove a limb in less than 10 minutes, yet even the fastest operation meant unbearable agony. Without pain relief. During the war, the Union distributed nearly 10 million opium pills, along with approximately 2.8 million ounces of opium powders and tinctures. Morphine became one of the most valuable medicines carried by Union medical officers. By 1862, many Confederate field hospitals had exhausted their morphine reserves entirely. The consequences were horrifying. Surgeons stood over crude wooden tables with little more than scalpels, bone saws, and determination. Some operations had to be performed with only whiskey, leather straps, or a soldier's own courage to dull the pain. Witnesses described men biting bullets, gripping wooden sticks until their teeth cracked, or screaming so loudly that the sound echoed across crowded hospital tents. Every operation became a race against blood loss, infection, and unbearable suffering. Doctors knew they needed another source of relief. Their answer was growing almost everywhere around them. Along dusty roads, beside abandoned fences, across open fields and riverbanks, wild lettuce. A plant that most people ignored suddenly became one of the South's most valuable medical resources. Confederate surgeons and hospital attendants began harvesting it themselves. They cut the thick, flowering stalks just before sunrise, when the white latex flowed most freely. The sticky, milky sap oozed from every fresh cut. They collected it carefully with knives and small containers. Each layer of sap was allowed to dry before another cut was made, gradually building a dark brown resin. After drying completely, the resin became lactucarium, the same substance that physicians in Europe had relied upon for centuries. It did not erase pain completely, but it softened the sharpest edges of suffering. It quieted violent coughing. It eased muscle tension. It calmed terrified patients enough for surgeons to work. For wounded men facing their final hours, it sometimes brought something even more precious than pain relief: sleep. One Confederate physician reportedly remarked that this humble plant had preserved more lives than almost any other substitute remedy they had discovered during the shortages. The experience left a lasting impression on American medicine. When the war ended in 1865, American doctors had learned something critical. Opium addiction was destroying thousands of veterans. By 1895, 1 in every 200 Americans was addicted to opiates. But wild lettuce showed no such curse. For centuries, wild lettuce had existed in a completely different world. It had never depended on expensive laboratories or industrial manufacturing. Its reputation had been built over generations of physicians, pharmacists, and patients who relied on it as a mild sedative and pain reliever. Its dried latex, known as lactucarium, had appeared in official pharmacopeias across Europe and the United States. Doctors prescribed it. Pharmacists stocked it. Medical textbooks described its uses. The global pain relief market reached $80 billion by 2023. Over-the-counter analgesics alone generated roughly $30 billion annually. Aspirin dominated. Approximately 60 billion aspirin tablets are consumed worldwide every year. Americans alone ingest 34 billion. More than 1 trillion aspirin tablets have been taken over the past century. Big Pharma built fortunes on molecules it could patent: ibuprofen, acetaminophen, naproxen, each one protected by intellectual property law, each one sold at controlled prices, each one requiring purchase again and again. The genius was creating need. Pain exists. Everyone suffers at some point. Headaches, arthritis, back pain, surgical recovery. The pharmaceutical industry promised relief for a price: $20 for a bottle of Advil, $15 for Tylenol. Multiply that by 8 billion people, recurring month after month. Companies like Bayer, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and GlaxoSmithKline built empires on this model. Marketing budgets worth billions. Lobbyists in Washington. Direct-to-consumer advertising that tells you to ask your doctor. But there was always a problem: side effects. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen can cause stomach ulcers and internal bleeding. Acetaminophen can damage the liver at high doses. Opioids, the most effective painkillers, created an addiction crisis that is still claiming the lives of around 100,000 Americans every year. The search for alternatives drove new research: CBD oil, turmeric, medical marijuana. Billions were invested in finding non-addictive pain relief. Yet wild lettuce, proven non-addictive for over 2,500 years, remained forgotten. Then, in the 1970s, something unexpected happened. The counterculture discovered it. Young people seeking legal alternatives to controlled substances found references in old herbals to lettuce opium. They brewed teas, they smoked dried leaves, they mixed it with catnip and damiana. It was weak compared to marijuana, but it was legal. The Food and Drug Administration had never scheduled it. The compounds also inhibit acetylcholinesterase, the same target as some Alzheimer's medications. Wild lettuce does not just dull pain. It may also help protect cognitive function. Today you can buy wild lettuce tinctures online, dried leaves in health food stores, and capsules marketed as natural sleep aids. Prices range from $15 to $30 per bottle. But there is a problem. Quality varies wildly. There is no FDA oversight. There is no standardization. Some products contain barely any lactucarium. Others are mislabeled entirely. with prickly lettuce being sold as wild lettuce, even though the compounds are different. Fresh lactucarium works when harvested correctly and used properly. But the knowledge of how to extract it, dry it, and dose it was largely lost when the last generation of pharmacists who stocked it passed away. The pharmaceutical industry did not set out to erase wild lettuce. They built a system where it simply could not compete. Patents favor synthetic molecules. Clinical trials cost millions of dollars. FDA approval requires corporate funding. Insurance reimburses brand-name drugs, but not wild plants. The result is the same. A painkiller used for 2,500 years vanished, not because it failed, but because it succeeded without generating revenue. Nearly 20% of adults worldwide live with chronic pain. The pain management industry is projected to reach $120 billion by 2033, and a plant growing in ditches, requiring no prescription, no refill, no patent, no profit, sits forgotten. Wild lettuce never left. It still grows along roadsides from California to Massachusetts, on riverbanks across Europe, and in waste ground throughout Iran, Austria, France, Germany, and Scotland. You can identify it, if you know what to look for. A tall stem, sometimes spotted with purple, jagged leaves with spines running along the center vein, and clusters of small yellow flowers. Cut the stem, and white sap bleeds out. The harvest method is simple. Cut the stems in late summer when the sap runs thick. Collect the latex on plates, or directly into alcohol. Dry it into a brown resin, or preserve it as a tincture. Fresh extraction works best because the active compounds degrade in old commercial products. Herbalists still teach it, foragers still harvest it, small companies still sell it. The FDA has never scheduled it. It remains legal to grow, legal to possess, and legal to use. But the medical establishment largely ignores it. Medical schools do not teach it, doctors do not prescribe it, pharmacies do not stock it, insurance will not cover it. It waits for knowledge to flow once again. If this story opened something for you, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Every like, every share, every comment helps preserve what they tried to erase. The next vault opens soon.